Billionaire lost his fortune overnight, until the janitor said, "Sir, you forgot this one paper." The stock market didn't crash that morning, Jonathan Hale's life did. In a single hour, the towering empire he had spent 20 years building crumbled like dust between his fingers. Numbers turned red, alarms flashed across every screen in his high-tech office, and the world he believed was unshakable suddenly collapsed under the weight of a single, devastating financial blow. Employees whispered outside his glass door, stock tickers bled downward in sharp violent lines, and Jonathan sat frozen in the center of it all, the billionaire who had everything, now holding nothing but fear. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected miracles, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps us bring you more stories like this. Jonathan's office felt colder than usual, as if the air itself carried the weight of failure. He had always been the man in control, the visionary entrepreneur who could predict market shifts before they even began. Reporters called him the man with the Midas mind. Investors practically lined up for a chance to work with him. And his company, Hale Technologies, had become a symbol of American innovation and success. But that morning, none of those accolades mattered. All that mattered was the merciless truth glowing on every screen: he was ruined. A competitor had launched a surprise technology overnight, something his own company had been quietly developing but wasn't ready to release. Somehow, in a way he couldn't yet understand, they had beaten him to it. Stocks plummeted, partners withdrew, and within hours over 60% of Jonathan's fortune evaporated. The board was already scheduling an emergency meeting that could very well remove him as CEO. His phone buzzed relentlessly with messages he didn't want to read. The world, which once felt like it danced to his rhythm, now felt like it was pushing him off a cliff. He leaned back in his chair, his pulse pounding in his ears. For the first time in his adult life, he felt helpless. Not angry. Not frustrated. Just empty. The kind of emptiness that swallows a man whole. His office door opened quietly, so quietly he almost didn't notice. A young woman stepped inside wearing a simple blue cleaning uniform, yellow gloves still on her hands, and a cautious expression on her soft face. Her name, pinned to her pocket, read Emily Carter. She had only been working there a few weeks, barely long enough for Jonathan to remember her face. Normally, he would have barely glanced at her. Today, he didn't even lift his head. He assumed she was there to clean, but instead of moving toward the windows or the trash cans, she stood there awkwardly, almost nervously, as if unsure whether to speak. Jonathan didn't look at her. Didn't speak. Didn't care. He just stared at the lines of red across the screen behind her. But Emily eventually took a small step forward, her voice barely above a whisper as she said, "Sir. I think you dropped this." Jonathan didn't react. Her words barely registered. The last thing he cared about was whatever scrap of paper she believed belonged to him. Emily hesitated, then reached out. In her gloved hand was a small folded sheet, worn, creased, almost forgotten. She held it out gently, as though the paper itself was fragile. Jonathan tried to wave her away, but something about the way she kept holding it, carefully, respectfully, made him pause. He sighed, finally lifting his head, and reached out without even glancing at the paper. But the moment it touched his hand, something inside him shifted. It wasn't just any paper. It was the one paper he had spent years writing and rewriting. A simple sheet containing his very first business plan, the dream that started everything. The plan he wrote when he was 21 years old, broke, hopeful, and living in a tiny dorm room at a community college. He kept it in his office as a reminder of where he came from, but somehow, amidst the panic of the morning, it must have fallen from his desk. Now, this forgotten girl, the janitor he'd barely acknowledged, was returning it to him like it was something sacred. Emily stepped back, sensing his surprise. She didn't speak. She didn't push. She simply offered a small, kind smile that held no judgment, no pity, just sincerity. The kind of sincerity Jonathan hadn't felt from anyone in a very long time. Jonathan stared at the paper as the room around him seemed to quiet. He hadn't read it in years, but every word came back to him with painful clarity. The dreams he once had. The passion. The hunger. He realized how far he had drifted from the man who wrote those lines. Success had replaced humility. Pressure had replaced creativity. And fear, hidden deep inside him, had grown into something that consumed him. Emily finally spoke again. "My dad used to say, when everything falls apart, it's usually because life is trying to rebuild you the right way." She seemed embarrassed after saying it. "Sorry. I know it's not my place. I just thought I should say something." Jonathan didn't respond. He simply watched her walk away, quietly closing the office door behind her. But something she said burrowed deep into him. "Rebuild you the right way." He looked again at the paper. At the neatly scribbled ideas, the crude drawings, the messy handwriting of a young man who believed he could change the world even when he had nothing. He felt something heavy inside him begin to loosen. He stood from his chair. For the first time since the collapse began, he wasn't thinking about failure, he was thinking about possibility. The competitor's technology might have beaten his company to the surface, but Jonathan's mind was still sharp and experienced. He realized that buried deep in the older version of his plans, ideas he had never pursued, lay a solution more innovative than anything his company ever built. He suddenly saw a pathway forward. A way to rebuild his company from the ground up, smarter, faster, more resilient. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove his younger self right. He gathered his remaining team, pulled out old plans, and began working with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. He spent nights at the office, barely sleeping, while the world assumed Hale Technologies was done forever. But something miraculous was happening behind those closed doors. Jonathan was rediscovering himself. And he never forgot Emily's words. They echoed in his mind every time exhaustion crept in. In just 8 weeks, Jonathan had developed a new prototype, one that far outclassed the competitors. Investors returned cautiously, then eagerly. The media buzzed with rumors that he was about to make an unprecedented comeback. And when he finally stepped onto the stage to reveal the new technology, applause erupted like thunder. Stocks surged. The board reinstated their full confidence in him. Hale Technologies was reborn from ashes into something stronger than ever. But Jonathan knew the truth. His comeback didn't start with innovation, or strategy, or genius. It started with a janitor holding a forgotten piece of paper. He searched for Emily around the building, but she wasn't an easy person to find. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't draw attention. She simply worked, quietly and humbly. When Jonathan finally found her cleaning a hallway late one evening, she looked startled, thinking she might have accidentally caused trouble. But Jonathan thanked her. Truly thanked her. And he meant every word. He offered her a scholarship, full tuition to any university she wanted. Emily cried, confessing she wanted to study nursing but could never afford school. Jonathan also offered her family financial support, ensuring the medical bills her father left behind would no longer burden them. She tried to refuse at first, but Jonathan insisted. "Sometimes," he said softly, "people like you rebuild people like me." Months passed, and Jonathan became a changed man. Not softer, but better. More grounded. More human. His company thrived not out of fear of losing, but from a newfound commitment to purpose. And each time employees passed Emily's photo, now framed in the hallway as employee who inspired the company's rebirth, they smiled. Not because she was famous. Not because she did something extraordinary. But because she proved that kindness and small actions can shape destinies in ways no one expects. Jonathan never forgot that morning. The fear. The loss. The silent collapse of everything he once valued.